Good morning and welcome to this emergency session of the Nerd Avengers. We're here because, in an unusual move, the Supreme Court handed down decisions today. Usually they do so at 10 a.m. on Thursdays. And we were waiting in anticipation that they were finally, after months of waiting, going to decide the question of presidential immunity. But they, of course, pulled a bait and switch and they did not do that. However, there was a very significant ruling. Hey, Ali. Hey, Jen. Thanks for joining me today. I want to read a tweet from Mark Joseph Stern just to first give a very broad sense of what the ruling is, give a little bit of background, and then Ali, your reaction, and then Jen, you can talk us through the finer legal points, which I know nothing about. Okay, so big. The Supreme Court strikes down the federal ban on bump stocks, holding that it is not authorized by existing statute. A 6-3 decision with all three liberals in the dissent. Now, why? I think it's pretty obvious why that matters. We'll get more into that in a minute, but I want to give some background just so we understand what the ban was in reaction to. If you remember in 2017, a shooter holed up in the Mandalay Bay Hotel in Las Vegas and using several rifles that were modified in this way with bump stocks, he proceeded in 11 minutes, firing more than 1,000 rounds to kill 60 people and wound over 800 in 11 minutes. So the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, instituted a ban on the kinds of modifications the mass murderer used, which seems to make perfect sense to me. So, and then if you think about what motivated this guy, he was angry at how the casinos had treated him and had in his hands at his disposal weapons to slaughter in 11 minutes 60 people and grievously wound many more, totaling 800 wounded. So, Ali, on the face of it, this seems pretty horrific.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any human should have the ability to kill that many people or injure that many people at their, disposal whenever they feel like it, in that short of amount of time. I mean, it's just disturbing to think that that happened, and then here we have this ban that was instituted during the Trump era, and now this illegitimate Supreme Court. And Clarence Thomas, who is already under investigation for a number of other things, is overturning the ban. And I mean, I don't think any average person or anyone in their right mind needs a bump stock on their weapon that's already extremely deadly. I don't understand this ruling at all.
And you know what, Ali, what makes it just so nonsensical? I think the illegitimate supermajority, I think many of them, if not all of them, would describe themselves as originalists. So in my mind, that means they're all for enslaving other human beings, and they're all for, as has become very obvious in the last few months, or the last year, they're all for delegating women to second-class citizenship. And, yet they don't look at the Second Amendment from an originalist point of view, because back then we were dealing with muskets, which took like a minute to load and had terrible aim. So they are basically saying that a semi-automatic rifle equipped with a bump stock is not a machine gun, which somehow makes it okay that it can fire hundreds of rounds in a minute. I mean, help me make sense of that.
Yeah, they're getting so technical here. And it's like, at the end of the day, the founders could not have imagined weapons like that we have today, that are weapons of war used to kill a mass number of civilians, for no other reason, not to defend their country, but for people's own selfish, messed up personal vendettas. So, I mean, it's just ridiculous that we take this amendment so literally and and include weapons of today that no one could have possibly thought of. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and not only take it literally, but also cut it in half and get rid of the second part of it, which has to do with a well-regulated militia. Now it's literally just like any person, any individual, separate and apart from any organization, can carry whatever kind of weapon of mass death they want. And Jen, I want you to talk us through the legalities, but also something unusual happened today in that not the dissent, which obviously needed to be written and hopefully was very forceful, but it was read aloud from the bench by Justice Sotomayor.
Yeah, so let me address that second part first and then sort of back up and walk people off the ledge, so to speak. It's unusual.
Good luck with that, by the way.
Yeah, it's unusual when a justice reads a dissent from the bench, but they do so because they're especially irritated. And this is something Ruth Bader Ginsburg, God bless her soul, used to do, unfortunately, very frequently toward the end of her life. Now, I am super happy that Sonia Sotomayor decided to use her voice in front of the public instead of crying in her office. It's a much better way to express yourself, and there she did it. Now, I have not read her dissent yet, but let me start with the point that this was a 6-3 decision, and secondly, let's talk about why it's not as bad as folks are saying. It's pretty bad, and then talk about what it did and what it didn't do, and a sleeper issue that people need to be focused on. So, as you mentioned, Mary, this was a rule put out by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. And let me just say a footnote. I've always thought it was weird that there was a single bureau that dealt with alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, because I cannot think of a worse combination of things to be doing all at once.
Maybe but that's why.
I know they're the vices, but Jesus Christ. Okay, so let's that aside. So this rule came out, and when agencies, federal agencies, are created by statute. So the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms came into existence because Congress created it, and agencies have statutory authority based on what the statute says to make rules. So the ATF took a look at a particular statute that regulates firearms, specifically 26 USC 5845 for the nerds. And this section has definitions.
I'm not that kind of nerd, but okay.
And there's a definition in this federal statute of what a machine gun is. And the reason why that type of firearm is defined is because machine guns can be banned. And when I say can be banned, I mean that the U.S. Supreme Court, including Justice Scalia, made it really clear and I think it's either Heller 1 or Heller 2. These are big cases about gun control under the Second Amendment. The Supreme Court has made it clear that it's perfectly kosher to ban machine guns. So this statute, it's important to define what a machine gun is. So ATF, who is a flippant expert in firearms, took a look at the statute and said, okay, we think a bump stock is the equivalent of a machine gun because you've modified a regular rifle to have the same effect. Okay, so what happened today is SCOTUS avoided even reaching the Second Amendment. There's a doctrine called constitutional avoidance, and courts are supposed to avoid deciding a constitutional issue if they can avoid it. Okay, so here they just decide the statutory one. And this is where it gets really technical and annoying, the way Ellie said, this is kind of bullshit. So they said that a semi-automatic rifle that has a bump stock doesn't qualify as a machine gun under that language of the statute. And this is the utter bullshit. They said because it cannot fire more than one shot, quote, by a single function of the trigger. And if it could, it would not do so automatically. Okay. So that sucks, but here's the good news first, and then the sleeper bad news. The good news is Congress could amend, I believe, the statute to more broadly define machine gun. Now, of course, that will go up to the Supreme Court at some point if they do, as to whether that's kosher with the Second Amendment. The bad news is good luck getting the statute amendment with this Congress. Fine. The sleeper issue here, which is of greater concern, is that this is yet another case where the Supreme Court decides it's going to substitute its judgment for that of an agency that has expertise in interpreting its own statute. And this makes me super nervous for a case that we are all watching out for, where they may kill what's called the Chevron doctrine, which is all about letting agencies do their job, and the Supreme Court not undermining the will of Congress and the will and the judgment expertise of the agencies. So that's where I have. It's not as bad as people say, but practically speaking, what sucks is you cannot ban these things, and now everyone's going to go out and buy them. Fuck you, Supreme Court.
Okay, so first of all, is anything involving the Chevron doctrine being decided this term?
Yes, it is.
All right, well, that's something to look forward to. And secondly, Allie, I don't feel any better. I thought Jen was supposed to make us feel better.
Yeah.
And I think I feel worse.
I agree. I mean, at the end of the day, like she said, people are going to go out and buy them because they can. And that makes our...
Let me back up. What makes me so mad about the Supreme Court, and let me just be clear.
Oh, she's going to make us feel worse. Okay,
no, better.
Perfect.
Well, it's kind of a worse.
Tuning in.
So I talked to my students about this. SCOTUS could have, there's two choices when you think an agency maybe slightly overreached a little bit, but it's unclear because obviously 3 justices thought it was fine. What the Supreme Court could have done, which way they should do, because they're not a democratically elected body, is they could have said, okay, fine, I'm fine with the ATF interpretation. And then wait for if Congress isn't fine, then they could act and say, no, exclude bump stocks. That's what the Supreme Court should do. First, do no harm. Trust the agency. This is the functional equivalent. And then if the will of the people is such that Congress wants to say, no, come to think of it, we want bump stocks that can fire 1,000 rounds and kill 60 people, right? That is what the flippin' court should have done. I know it didn't make you feel better, but I'm trying to instruct a little bit about the choice the court had.
Yeah, and as we see time after time, this court chooses the worst possible option, unless it's a case coming from the Fifth Circuit, which is the only, as Dahlia would say, the Fifth Circuit is the only circuit in the country, especially Andrew Kazmarik's court down in Amarillo, Texas, that gives this Supreme Court occasional opportunities to make itself seem legitimate, which it's not. But we saw that yesterday. There was a unanimous decision having to do with standing in a case that seeks to ban mifepristone, which is one of the abortion medications. Is it birth control or abortion? I should know that.
Abortion medication for up to 11 weeks.
Thank you. So, they made a unanimous decision in the case, but, let's just remember it's because the case coming out of the Fifth Circuit was insane. Like, random people were claiming they had standing and that it was harming them. It's just completely crazy. But of course, by ruling on standing, they didn't actually make a decision about the legality of the drug. And they basically gave a green light to somebody to come up with a better idea and a better argument to bring it back to the court. And this is the really cynical part. And I think Dahlia and Mark Joseph Stern are two of the very few people who did not see this as a victory. They saw it as a postponement of the horrors, because this way it's not an election issue. And it's just, they're going to wait until next year. And we said this yesterday, this time next year, it will be illegal to get any kind of medication, any kind of pills for abortion, which are now readily available. So I don't know, Allie. Nothing about this conversation has made me feel better.
Well, I feel like the Supreme Court is extremely calculated in their decisions, whether it's Donald Trump's immunity case or, like you just said, the mifepristone case. Like, they are acting as a political body, waiting until it's a politically opportune moment to do things. And I don't know. I mean, I do not trust Clarence Thomas or Justice Alito to make legitimate decisions or opinions on these cases one bit. Like, that just sucks, when you feel like they're supposed to be an independent, like, unbiased, I guess, source of the law, and they're not. And part of that is because they're just being paid off by GOP donors, or they just have a ton of special interests that are influencing their decisions. And
Can I just jump in because Kyle,
just hang on one
go ahead.
second. No, I was going to ask you to read that
Okay.
because, as I mentioned, Justice Sotomayor read part of her dissent, or maybe the whole thing, from the bench, which is an unusual move and typically indicates that the justice writing the dissent is quite upset about the majority decision. So I was just going to say that, to Ali's point, this is an illegitimate court. There's no reason to trust any of them, but most obviously Clarence Thomas and Ginny Thomas, who are like co-justices, and Samuel Alito and Martha Ann Alito, who also were co-justices. So we need to start digging in really deep to find out, like, seriously, what can be done, because the idea that nothing could be done and we just have to accept the fact that we need to live, our children need to live with this Supreme Court for another 50 years is unacceptable to me. Anyway, Jen, go ahead.
Yeah, so the dissent that Justice Sotomayor read from the bench, representing herself, Justice Kagan and Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, was just remarkable. And Kyle gave us an excerpt from it. Here's what she said. When I see a bird that walks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, I call that bird a duck. Okay. So, by the way, folks, if you want to actually hear her voice, there's a fantastic website called oyez.org, oyez.org. And I don't think they'll have it up right away, but you can follow, if you go to the website, you can follow the recent cases. And when they give, when they speak from the bench, you can actually hear her voice, which is, I think, pretty exciting if you want to feel some righteous indignation.
And hear that New York accent.
True.
All right. Well, sorry that we couldn't bring you more uplifting news, but, eyes wide open. Let's just use it as fuel to keep us motivated in the very long months ahead of us, which are, by the way, going to go by very quickly. So, let's not get overwhelmed. It's okay to be upset and angry, because why we're human. But let's not get demoralized. So, Ali, Jen, thank you so much for being here. Kyle, Adam, thanks for getting this put together so quickly. And Jen will see you at 8 a.m. on Monday, Eastern time. The nerds will be back at 12 noon on Tuesday. That's also Eastern time. And Ali, your awesome show is going to be debuting next week. It's called America Show. So excited for that. You've got an amazing interview with Lauren Windsor keyed up. Can't wait. So
amazing.
Everybody, yeah, it's gonna be great. So everybody's gonna need to tune in. We'll keep you posted, obviously, on when that's happening. And in the meantime, have a great weekend, and please stay safe and be kind.